year is 1954. Along the shoreline of Leonardo, New Jersey, a construction crew is breaking ground on a fenced compound just visible from the coastal road. Local residents driving past can see the antenna towers going up, the low concrete buildings taking shape, the military vehicles moving in and out through a guarded gate. Nobody is hiding the fact that something military is being built here. What the government is not advertising, what it is carefully, deliberately not discussing, is what exactly these installations are designed to do and what they will eventually be armed with. 20 million people live within 30 miles of sites like this one, spread across Bergen, Middlesex, Monmouth, and Essex counties. They can see the fences, they can see the radar dishes. Many of them refer to these places, correctly, as missile sites. What they do not know, what their government has chosen not to tell them, is that some of these missiles will eventually carry nuclear warheads, and that the decision to detonate one of those warheads, if it ever came, would have happened over American skies, above American homes, to stop something far worse from reaching the city beyond the horizon. This is not a story of a hidden conspiracy buried beneath the surface of suburban New Jersey. It is something more interesting and more unsettling than that. It is a story of how a democracy chose to defend itself during the most dangerous period in human history, what tools it used, what risks it accepted, and what it decided its own citizens did not need to fully understand. 12 Nike missile installations formed a defensive ring around New York City on New Jersey soil. Most of them are gone now. Some of what they left behind is still there, underfoot, unremarked upon, and the full story of what these sites meant to the soldiers who staffed them, to the communities that surrounded them, and to the cold strategic logic that created them, has only come fully into focus decades after the last missile was removed. By the late 1940s, the United States Army was confronting a threat that had no historical precedent. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb in 1949, years ahead of American projections, and its long-range bomber fleet, modeled closely on American B-29 designs, was growing rapidly. The arithmetic of nuclear air defense was unforgiving. A single Soviet bomber breaking through American air defenses and reaching New York City with a nuclear weapon would cause casualties in the hundreds of thousands within seconds. The existing network of anti-aircraft guns and interceptor aircraft could reduce that risk but could not eliminate it. What the Army needed was a guided missile system, something that could track a fast-moving aircraft with radar, accelerate to intercept it at altitude, and destroy it with certainty before it reached its target. The Nike program, developed through a partnership between Bell Laboratories and Western Electric, was that system. Nike Ajax, the first operational version, entered service in 1953. Nike Hercules, its more powerful successor, followed in 1958 and introduced a capability that transformed the program's strategic profile entirely: the option to equip the missile with a small nuclear warhead. The rationale was straightforward and grimly practical. If Soviet bombers arrived in large formations, close together, a conventional missile could destroy one aircraft. A nuclear-tipped Hercules, detonated at altitude in the center of a formation, could destroy several simultaneously. It was a last resort option, one that carried obvious risks, but military planners considered those risks acceptable given the alternative. The warhead yield was kept relatively small, in the kiloton range, and the detonation would occur at high altitude, reducing but not eliminating the effects on the ground below. New Jersey was a natural location for a dense Nike deployment. The state formed the southwestern approach corridor to New York City, and its geography allowed installations to be positioned with overlapping radar coverage, each site reinforcing the others in a continuous defensive umbrella. 12 primary sites were established across the state, each designated by a two-letter code identifying its region. The installations were not secret in the sense of being concealed from public view. They were built on land acquired through standard government channels, often adjacent to existing roads, visible to passing traffic, and staffed by soldiers who lived partly within the local community. Nearby residents were generally aware they were military installations. Some communities developed a matter-of-fact familiarity with the sites, the way any town adjusts to a military presence. What was not publicly communicated, and what the Army handled with great care, was the specific nature of the weapons involved, and later, the introduction of nuclear capability. The existence of the Nike program was not classified. Technical details, warhead specifications, and the precise procedures governing nuclear authorization were. This was a meaningful distinction. People knew missile sites existed near them. They did not know that after 1958, some of those missiles could be armed with nuclear weapons. That specific fact remained within military and government channels, withheld not through dramatic subterfuge, but through the standard classification practices of the Cold War era, in which nuclear weapons information was among the most tightly held categories of government knowledge. The construction of each site followed a standardized template developed and refined as the program expanded nationally. Each installation was divided into two functional areas. The integrated fire control area housed the radar systems, the targeting equipment, the administrative buildings, and the barracks where soldiers lived. The launch area, sometimes separated from the IFC section by a short distance, contained the missile magazines, reinforced concrete structures partially below grade, where the missiles were stored horizontally until needed. Hydraulic launchers would elevate them to firing position during an alert. The underground construction was practical rather than dramatic. It provided protection against conventional attack and reduced the above-ground footprint of the most sensitive components. The soldiers who staffed these sites occupied a peculiar position in Cold War America. They were stationed in one of the most densely populated regions of the country, close enough to New York City that weekend liberty often meant taking the bus or train into Manhattan. Their daily reality, however, was one of constant operational readiness, rotating shifts at radar consoles, and maintenance cycles for equipment that had to function perfectly under the worst imaginable circumstances. Many of them were young, late teens, early 20s, and they understood clearly what their weapons were designed to do. Veterans of New Jersey Nike sites have described the atmosphere as professionally serious without being oppressive, a sustained alertness that became routine over months of deployment. The work was repetitive. The stakes behind the repetition were not. The Nike Ajax missiles that equipped the early New Jersey installations used a liquid propellant combination that was volatile and demanding to handle safely. The dangers of this system became tragically clear on May 22, 1958, at the Nike site in Middletown Township, Monmouth County. During a maintenance procedure, a missile exploded, triggering a chain reaction that killed 10 people, 6 soldiers and 4 civilian employees. It remains one of the deadliest accidents in the history of the domestic Nike program. The Army investigated the incident thoroughly, and the findings contributed to the accelerated transition toward the Nike Hercules system, which used a more stable solid fuel propellant. The Middletown explosion was not concealed. It was reported at the time, but its full documentation took years to emerge in detail through historical research and records requests. It stands as the most concrete reminder that the risks these sites carried were not hypothetical. The Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962 tested the New Jersey network in ways that the daily maintenance routines never had. For 13 days, as the confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union reached its most dangerous point, Nike sites across the country were elevated to their highest readiness status. At New Jersey installations, this meant missiles in launch position, radar systems running continuously, and personnel remaining at duty stations with minimal rotation. The specific authorization protocols governing nuclear release remained in place. No individual site commander held independent authority to launch a nuclear-armed missile. That authority resided at much higher levels of the command chain, but the men on those sites understood the proximity of the crisis to actual conflict. Veterans who have spoken about those days describe not panic, but a heightened, almost ceremonial seriousness. The recognition that the procedures they had rehearsed hundreds of times might, for the first time, be executed in earnest. The secrecy surrounding the nuclear capability of the Hercules missiles was maintained through classification rather than through active deception of the public. State and local governments were not formally briefed on nuclear warhead deployments at Nike sites. This was consistent with national policy across the program. Civil defense officials in New Jersey worked with general knowledge of the installation's military character without access to their specific weapons configurations. This was a deliberate policy choice, reflecting the federal government's judgment that nuclear weapons information required strict compartmentalization. Whether that judgment was correct, whether communities living adjacent to nuclear-armed installations had a right to more complete information, is a legitimate question that historians and policy analysts have examined in the decades since. The answer the government gave at the time was clear: they did not. The Nike program in New Jersey wound down through the late 1960s and early 1970s as the strategic threat environment shifted fundamentally. Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles, traveling on trajectories through space at speeds no surface-to-air missile could match, had replaced the bomber as the primary nuclear delivery vehicle. The Nike system had been designed to defeat aircraft. It had no capability against ICBMs. The installations that had represented the cutting edge of American air defense in 1954 were technologically obsolete by the late 1960s, and the Army decommissioned them in sequence. Nuclear warheads were removed under classified transportation protocols. Missiles and launch equipment were dismantled. Personnel were reassigned. What happened to the physical sites afterward varied considerably. Some were transferred to county and state park systems, where the original structures remain partially intact. The former Nike installation at Sandy Hook became part of the Gateway National Recreation Area, and the launch area structures are accessible to visitors today. Concrete bunkers and launcher rails that give a tangible sense of what these installations look like in operation. Other New Jersey sites were sold to municipalities or private buyers and redeveloped. In several cases, underground magazine structures were not fully excavated. The cost and complexity of removal was judged unnecessary, given that the hazardous materials had been removed, and concrete caps were poured over them. These sealed structures remain beneath what are now parks, athletic fields, and in some cases, residential developments. Their existence is documented. They are not mysterious. They are the unglamorous residue of infrastructure that outlived its purpose and was closed rather than fully demolished. The Nike program's history in New Jersey is well documented in the National Archives, in Army historical records, and in the research of historians who have studied the Cold War home front in detail. Most of the program's operational history was declassified gradually through the 1980s and 1990s. Former site personnel have given interviews, written memoirs, and participated in preservation efforts at the surviving structures. The picture that emerges is not of a government hiding something monstrous from an unknowing public, but of a democracy managing an unprecedented security challenge with tools that were imperfect, dangerous, and ultimately overtaken by the speed of technological change. What deserves reflection, standing at the edge of a New Jersey park where a Nike launch area once operated, is not the conspiracy that wasn't there, but the reality that was. Nuclear weapons stood ready on New Jersey soil for nearly 15 years. The soldiers responsible for them were young men living ordinary lives within an extraordinary obligation. The communities around them went about their routines a few hundred yards from the most destructive technology ever created. Nobody lied to them dramatically. The government simply did not tell them everything. And in the Cold War, that was considered sufficient. 12 sites, 20 million people. One question that the history of this program leaves genuinely open: not what was hidden, but whether the trade-offs made in the name of their defense, the risks accepted, the information withheld, the decisions made on their behalf without their knowledge, were the right ones. That question does not have a classified answer. It never did.